Governments are manipulating the weather with lasers. You have
sciences at Georgia Tech. She's an actual authority.
Days hotter than 50 degrees could become the norm for Melbourne and Sydney. Do you think researchers
Let's be real. Climate change isn't some political thing. It's nature. More importantly, how we interact with nature. And we're starting to mess up. So let's clear it up. What is climate change? Simply put, the climate is always changing, and it has been since Earth has existed.
Climate is always changing. All right, so there's no two opinions about it.
Natural causes like volcanic eruptions, Earth's changes of orbit, releases of greenhouse gases, and sun's radiation. Recently, though, when we're talking about climate change, we mean global warming exactly.
In the current context, it is the change occurring due to anthropogenic influence of increased greenhouse gas concentrations.
We have been contributing since around the 1800s in multiple ways. The most popular cause is CO2 emissions. This is mainly coming from driving and energy usage, as we have to burn fossil fuels to keep the lights on at home, but also to drive around. Another one is methane, or CH4. This comes from refining fuels, landfills, and animal waste. N2O, or nitrous oxide, is another one. Now this mostly comes from fertilizer use in agriculture. Now all these gases come into one grouping called greenhouse gases, or GHGs for short. Now when all these greenhouse gases come up together, we call that the greenhouse effect. To explain, the sun is constantly hitting Earth with radiation. Now, naturally, the Earth does take in some of this radiation, but some of it gets shot back out. We call that infrared radiation, or heat. When this heat comes back up, the greenhouse gases stop or slow down it, so it stays in the atmosphere. That means more heat is staying here on Earth. Now, greenhouse gases always naturally occur, so some heat's alright, it keeps life all good, but we're starting to add a lot of blankets, and a lot of blankets, it starts getting hot and it's not good. But it's cold, it's snowing outside. Well, we're not gonna have that type of Mad Max situation. It's gonna get hotter, but it's not gonna get that hot.
I think the notion that climate change is going to somehow reverse the seasons, that winter becomes like summer and we don't have winter at all, is not going to happen. We are not going to see the kind of day after tomorrow scenario like it is pictured in Hollywood.
Okay, so now we know how it works. Why should you care? Well, depending on who you are, you don't. You'll live a long enough life in a world that's not too crazy. Weather's going to be a little weird, a little hot, nothing that's going to kill you. You can drive all you want, eat all you want, don't care about the climate at all. Depending on who you are. Depending on who you are, you could also lose everything that you have. With the climate changing, heat is the main effect and concern of the greenhouse effect. We've recently been breaking records, and ones we shouldn't really be proud of. 2016 is the warmest year in recorded history. 2017 comes in second place, and 2018 is starting to look like it's going for a place too. Hurricane season has come up as a big part of the yearly process of seasons, especially here in Florida. It's starting to feel like we have multiple hurricanes every year, and we're starting to get used to having at least one big one each year as well. Although it is a part of nature and hurricanes will always happen, the way we have it now is not exactly normal. With our ever-increasing consumption, it's gotten worse. Since the early 80s, we have seen an increase of intensity, frequency, and duration of North Atlantic hurricanes. It's hard to think that we had 3 hurricanes just last year, all Category 4 or higher. Combined, Harvey, Irma, and Maria has costed over $250 billion, over 250 deaths, and has displaced hundreds of thousands of people. Deaths and injuries happen through trauma, drowning, destructive forces of wind, collapsed buildings and trees, lightning strikes, and carbon monoxide poisoning. The effect of hurricanes is devastating, especially for those with a lower income where they can lose everything they have. Naturally, we shouldn't be seeing this much trouble happening in such smaller time periods. Although what we do is not all to blame, it is a factor that contributes to the hurricanes. It's something we shouldn't be empowering. we now have an increased potential of getting hit each year by 46%. Sea level rise also poses one of the greatest effects with the rise in temperature. 20% of land for the 15 eastern states in America stands the effects of the 3-foot rise in sea level. For the whole world, 12% of the population is at risk of sea level rise and flooding. There's a huge concern as the risks of floodings go up. For coast-heavy areas, the economy will be hurt significantly, as well as the health of these populations. The increase of sea level as well poses a threat to the ecosystem in the area, where trees and local wildlife will decline. Miami currently experiences multiple floodings a year. Further floodings are expected to increase to 380 high tide floods a year. This will bring increased urban flooding, increased saltwater intrusion and contamination of drinking water supplies, and flooding of power plant substations. 1/5 of Miami-Dade County is a foot within sea level, which could affect $6.4 billion in taxable real estate. Poor regions in the world are most concerned as they are less prepared and much more prone to the effects from the sea level rise. Tourism also is prone to getting hurt. The general increase in heat hurts us as well. We're seeing more heat-related deaths around the world from excessive heat exposure and heat stroke. The temperature has also now shown a strong correlation with the heat and respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, especially with the elderly and youth. Here in Florida is a big issue as we have seen a big increase in temperature lately, which targets the large elderly population we have. Heat does not only harm our health, but will directly harm areas of the world that will have a large labor source.
Recently I saw an article appear in a publication where they are expecting that in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, the temperatures may go so high up in the summer that it would be impossible for laborers to work during the day. Just impossible. And for a huge population that is sustained in that region, if the labor force is not able to work during daylight hours, is going to be a huge disaster.
Looking at just 3 things that come from climate change already shows the dark future that we have ahead of us. There's a lot more things that also come, and it's frankly overwhelming. To list a few, I've overlooked vector-borne diseases, melting ice caps, forest fires, agriculture, the ocean's ecosystem, the land's ecosystem, and dry spots. All of these provide their own effects and are correlated to greenhouse gas emissions. But let's not forget that you might not get affected. If you are middle-aged and you don't live near the coast, you're going to live a life without any of this physically affecting you. It will first affect the hundreds of millions at the coast and the people that struggle with their wage. Then in the future, it's going to affect your children. They're going to be feeling all the effects of climate change, and it's going to be coming from multiple fronts. You might not get hurt, though. You don't have to do anything to help the environment. I think this clip, though, shows why you should.
I think if you have a concern for future generations, including your own kids and grandchildren, certainly you have to be very concerned. But if you're concerned about the well-being of yourself, probably less so. I think my generation, at least, can possibly survive through the impacts of the climate change. We will see some extreme weather events, but it is not going to affect me personally, but I will see a very large sector of most likely the impoverished people who will get affected. And I'm concerned about it, as I should be. But it's not personally affecting me, as in physically, but emotionally it does affect me, that there are so many impoverished people who are helpless and are getting affected by it.
If you do care, though, you can do something about it. There's a lot of small things you can do to help the environment, and it doesn't mean you have to go primitive. The main thing you have to do, though, is to consume less.
I think if you begin to consume less, that is the first step. That is, I think, the most important step. The rest of it is all lip service of sustainable development and such. That's not possible unless you make a very conscious a very conscious attempt in consuming less and living more simply than how you're doing it. That, I think, is the best way that you could possibly demonstrate your concern for the environment. Consume less, live simply.
The basics are turning lights off when you aren't using them, using less water, reuse things, recycle things, carpool or use public transport when possible, or maybe even try walking. Also, make sure to keep your car tuned up. If you want to do something bigger, look into using renewable energy. Look into buying a hybrid or electric. Buy Energy Star appliances when it comes up. Insulate your home properly. Don't cook too much food. Eat less meat, even though it doesn't mean you have to be vegan. Compost. Buy local and organic when possible, and talk to friends and neighbors about the changing climate. The biggest issue, though, is that we're starting to get used to all this stuff. Media likes to spice things up and make it look all dramatic, and you hear it all the time. We see the temperature keep on going up every day, but we see that as a normal thing when it really isn't.
These record-breaking temperatures, either extremely cold or extremely warm temperatures, may no longer look like breaking news, right? It becomes a very common feature, and that is quite dangerous.
So go do something about climate change. Make it a practice in your life and enjoy it.